First, I'm going to give you a welcome, which I'm doing. After that, Herb Levy will recite a poem on freedom in about 2 or 3 minutes. Then I will talk about what Holocaust means to me. After that, Ambassador Saperstein will speak about, in general, about Holocaust and the persecution. He is the ambassador, and I will introduce him in a few minutes. And then we will recognize certain individuals who have done some outstanding work in pursuit of religious freedom for all humanity. Then we talk about Gregory, Dr. Gregory Stanton will talk about the impending genocide in India and what can be done about it. And Gurvinder Singh will speak after that about the persecution of minorities in India. And we'll conclude if Nadine Moinza joins, we will have her after that. Then Mary Ann Thompson-Frenk will conclude the program. And then at the very end, we'll have a short 7-line prayer about never saying again. Now, let me ask my friend Herb Levy to share a poem. He shared the poem with me about freedom a few days ago. It was such a powerful poem. I want him to share that with all of you. Herb, please go ahead, unmute and share.
Thank you, Mike. I want to dedicate this poem to my wife's parents. Each of them lost their first families in Poland as the Nazis killed their entire first families. They escaped Poland to Russia and survived the war in a labor camp in Siberia. Morris and Rosa Schwarz. Our sacred story tells us we were slaves.
Herb?
I got muted.
Yeah.
I don't know where that cut off.
Herb, please go ahead.
Let me start back at the beginning. Our sacred story tells us we were slaves to Pharaoh. But even when we found freedom, we found new pharaohs: work, substance, food. We want more when we have more than enough, because we are not yet free. To cross the Reed Sea, first we have to find the Reed Sea. The story tells us being chased helps drive us to the Reed Sea, but now we don't know where to look. Try map questing Reed Sea and see what doesn't come up. We can't find the Reed Sea by ourselves. We need a guide to help open our eyes to the freedom we don't have. We need to learn that our freedom is an illusion. No one is free until we are all free. Until all humans are free, all sentients are free, all plants and oceans and microbes are free to live in balance. We can find our peace in the struggle for freedom and balance. We can find our purpose in the commitment to others. Once we've made that commitment to others, we can begin to know what freedom is.
Are you there?
That was the end.
Yeah.
Thank you very
I
much,
think
Herb.
Herb is done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Friends, this program, 17th Annual Holocaust and Genocide, let me share what Holocaust means to me. Of all the people on the earth, my mother would be pleased to know what I'm doing, I'm doing what it takes to be a good citizen, a good Muslim, to respect, honor, protect the sanctity of life. Commemorating Holocaust and genocides for 17 years is a lifelong fulfillment to me. I'll tell you why. Education is the purpose of this program. We have to learn, acknowledge, and reflect upon the terrible things we humans have inflicted upon each other. And we have to understand that our safety hinges on safety of all people around us. As a Muslim committed to building cohesive societies, it was an honor to step up to the plate of God consciousness, which simply means caring and being sensitive to all of God's creation, life and matter. There is a phrase in Judaism called tikkun olam, that is repairing the world. And likewise, there is a phrase in Islam that I have coined called Islah al-alam, means repairing the world. Resetting harmony in the world is our sacred duty. How does this happen? When I was a 10-year-old boy, I just about read everything that my mom read. She was a voracious reader. There was one book she did not want me to read. She said, run away from it. You are not going to read this book. And that book was called Aishman Sat Lakh Yehudiyon Ka Khatil in the Urdu language, my mother tongue, which means Ekman, killer of 6 million Jews. My mother insisted that I was not capable of reading the book. And so she hid it from me. But when she was out with family, I snuck in and read the book. What I saw, 2 images. Shahid, you want to put those 2 images?
Yeah.
To that image? That image changed my entire life.
Yeah, let's see.
The picture continues to influence me. It is about betrayal of people. A group of Jews were shoved in front of a ditch and then were shot into the pit. The look of helplessness on their face, as if looking at me and saying, are you going to do anything about it? They were not complaining, but with all humility, they were enduring the betrayal from the entire world with dignity. It has been a difficult picture for me. It had remained with me since I was a 10-year-old kid. For the next 44 years of my life, I was not able to see the World War II movies with scenes from Holocaust on the screen. I would turn the TV off and go into silence for hours on. I just could not get over the idea how people can do that to fellow human beings. There was a fear in me, fear to witness that betrayal. They never begged anyone to save their life. I just stared into the spaces, even without complaining. I have held them in a very high esteem for the dignified death they faced, lonely.
I believe we have Walter Ruby just joined.
Thank you very much. Fast forward, Monday, September 11, 2005. The first public commemoration of 9/11 was initiated, and it was called the Unity Day USA, and bringing all Americans together. About 650 people joined the meeting, 10 mayors and several police and fire chiefs, and the FBI chief and clergy from every faith and civil leaders were represented in the event, including Mary Ann Thompson-Frenk, who is the last speaker. It was all on a sudden, while the Mayor Joe Chow was speaking, the alarm went off. Everybody was scared. I distinctly remember the fear in their eyes, particularly the front 2 rows were my Jewish friends, including Muriel Pincus, who passed away about 5 years ago. They were my guests, and they were afraid, and everybody dashed out of the hall when the alarm went off. Remember, it was a 9/11 event. So the Mayor Simpson of Frisco called immediately, found out it was a false alarm. Some kid pulled the fire alarm, and they called the fire marshal to come back. And I asked the fire marshal, I asked the FBI chief, Guadalupe Gonzalez, and all the mayors to invite people to come back. And I went and held the Mayor Muriel Pincus' hand and brought the entire Jewish friends back. The fear prompted me to do something about it. I said to myself, they are my guests. Nobody should be afraid of being here. And that I was consumed with that fear. What can I do about it? How can I prevent this? That fear prompted me to do something about it. Not sure what, but I do know what Gorthe had said: when you are committed, all sorts of things will happen to you. And Providence moves in, and God paves the way to fulfill your commitment. In November that year, the United Nations made a proclamation to commemorate Holocaust on January 27, 2006. I said to myself, dear God, did you pave the way for me? That was my commitment. It is coming to a fulfillment. 60 years after the Holocaust, the United Nations finally recognized the Holocaust event. I called on my friends, including Bernie, with the idea of commemorating the event, and thus began this journey of 17 years. Education is the purpose. Yom HaShoah has been commemorated in synagogues since the 50s. And for the first time in history, others have joined in this commemoration. It's just not Muslims, but people of all faiths and no faiths have participated in the pluralistic faith. I just want to assure my Jewish friends, that you are not alone. We are with you in the most somber moments of your life. The first commemoration in 2006 lifted a huge burden off me. I felt the relief. I thought of my mom. I thought she would be happy. This was my calling, to build bridges. William and Rosa Schaff, the Holocaust survivors, delivered a talk for 1 full hour. 1 full hour. It was literally pin drop silence. Nobody even breathed. That's how quiet it was. There are incredible stories associated with this journey. We had many tense moments. Some were purely political. Everyone was reluctant and ready to face them. It was the resistance to the inclusion of pain of others. Although I do not believe in divine intervention, a revelation came to me a few seconds before such an acknowledgement to remove the tension. Who is going to be recognized? There were the Palestinians, there were the Israelis. They were looking with their guns, pointing their guns at me. And that revelation helped me and helped everyone. I said at that time, dear friends, it is painful to miss out the suffering of one people or the other. We do not want to live with the burden of consciously or subconsciously excluding the suffering of any. Hence, to be fair to all, let's silently pray for every atrocity that comes to our mind and pray for the relief of the victims and punishment are released to the perpetrators. Sounds simple, but that offered a magical relief to my friends on the Jewish side as well as the Muslim side or the Palestinian side. Thank God every atrocity was silently included in one prayer or the other. Hate is one of the many sources disrupting peaceful functioning of a society, and it is our duty, sacred duty, individually and severally, to track down the source of such hate and work on mitigating it. Indeed, each one of us needs to do our share of work. It is our moral responsibility to keep law and order and faithfully guard the safety of every citizen. The spark of hatred will not disappear through law and order. It will be temporary and off the screen, but it will reappear every little conflagration. As civil societies, this has to be worked out for the long-term good. The injustices done in the past will not fall off the earth. It lingers and eats away peace between individuals and nations. And we are responsible to bring a closure to the loose ends of many such conflicts. Our ambassador, which I will introduce, he has done a lot of work on that, tying the loose ends, Ambassador Saperstein. So we all can trust each other and feel safe and focus on the collective prosperity of all of us. This program will address such occurrences and most importantly, how to bring closure to these sparks and work on building cohesive societies where no human has to live in apprehension or fear of the other. There is a shameless cruelty in us. Either we shy away or refuse to acknowledge the sufferings of others, worrying that it will devalue our own, or somehow it amounts to infidelity to our own cause. Shame on us that we're justifying massacres by believing and propagating that the victims deserved it and asked for it. Shame on us if that thought enters our mind. We need to rehabilitate ourselves and purify and free ourselves from such things. We sincerely hope the attendees will walk out with the following understanding of this program. Other people's suffering is as legitimate as mine. It is easy to see ourselves as victims, but we must also see the perpetrator in us. When we strip the policies out of a conflict, we see hope. We can value others' suffering without lessening our own. The overriding desire to highlight our own blinds us from others' suffering. A sense of responsibility for creating a better world is awakened. Ultimately, coexistence and everyone's safety and peace should be the divine driving thought. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our speaker, Ambassador at Large, Rabbi David Nathan Saperstein. He is an American rabbi, lawyer, and a Jewish community leader who served as the United States Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. He previously served as the Director and Chief Legal Counsel at the Union of Reform Judaism's Religious Action Center for more than 30 years. On July 28, 2014, President Obama nominated Saperstein to be the first non-Christian to hold the post of United States Ambassador at Large. And again, he was appointed Senate confirmation. He was also co-chaired the Coalition to Preserve Religious Liberty and serves on the boards of NAACP, Common Cause, People for American Way. In 1999, Ambassador Saperstein was elected as the first chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. On August 28, Ambassador Saperstein delivered the invocation at the Democratic National Convention's final session before Senator Barack Obama accepted the party's nomination. Ambassador Saperstein inspires me. He has overseen the religious freedom work around the world. I would have loved to be his assistant in doing such work. Ambassador Saperstein, the floor is yours. You have to unmute. Sir.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciate it. Mike Ghouse has been just a remarkable champion for religious freedom, religious tolerance, for pluralism as a crucial social and legal and communal good. And we're deeply appreciative of your leadership in this arena. I'm particularly pleased to be with such distinguished speakers that we have set up for today, including some great experts on the issue of genocide. I'm looking forward to hearing their talks, and particularly pleased to be with the honorees who are receiving the award today, two of whom are good friends of mine over many years. So this makes it a special gathering for me to do. I'm going to cover a bit of ground here. Let me begin with two contextual points before I get to what I was asked to do, that is to focus on the situation at a global level of religious freedom today in the world. First macro point that I wanted to make here. Elie Wiesel was famous for having observed that the Holocaust was a unique event with universal applications. And that clearly is true. There are powerful universal implications to the Holocaust. It doesn't mean that anything has to be analogized exactly with the Holocaust or be like the Holocaust for it to have significant implications for us. So just to muse for a minute on several ways that I heard Elie Wiesel talk about this, or Self-Evident, or other folks who are great spokespersons for the meaning of the Holocaust in our time here. Elie Wiesel was a champion when other genocides, other crimes against humanity would speak out. Time and again, he spoke out. It's one of the reasons he received the Nobel Peace Prize. And that was a remarkable contribution that he modeled for all of us. But you think about Anne Frank, who died in the Holocaust, and then think about the millions and millions and millions of young women who today don't have access to school, don't have the potential to grow up to be another Anne Frank. She didn't have that potential because she was killed in the Holocaust. They don't have the potential because of something we can address and change. And she becomes a model for that in her death, a rallying cry to speak for the rights of all young girls to have the opportunities to fulfill their own potential that she was denied in her case. Or think about climate change, which has the threat and the ability to destroy the world as we know it if we don't speak out. Or any time someone is discriminated against. If the Holocaust teaches any lesson, it is what happens when good people stand, in the words of Leviticus, idly by the blood of their neighbor. And it doesn't have to be genocide for us to act, because the time to stop genocides are before they happen, not as they're happening or after they happen, but before they happen. That's the time we're best equipped to actually stop it. Because even if it results in military warfare to stop it in the middle of the genocide, so many lives will be lost before it happens. But I do want to make one observation that perhaps our other speakers can reflect on. I do think that there is a danger in the almost obsession that exists today for us to define terrible things as genocide. Terrible things is analogous to the Holocaust. Crimes against humanity may not be a Holocaust, but can be absolutely terrible. Ethnic cleansing is not inherently meet the definition of genocide. Does not meet the definition of genocide. But in almost every case, it is a horrible tragedy and catastrophe for those hundreds of thousands, millions of people. And if we stand silently because it's not a genocide, terrible evil will be allowed to happen. Look at the Congo. As many people have been killed in the civil wars of the Congo since the 1990s as were killed in the Holocaust, or almost as many, more than the Jews who were killed, the 6 million Jews who were killed. It's not technically genocide what happens, but we can't stand idly by. And arguments over whether or not Darfur technically met the qualification of genocide under the legal definition, of whether the Rohingya Muslims technically meet the qualification under international law of genocide, should never deter us from acting wherever evil is happening. And I just offer that as a caution in terms of how we use genocide. We use genocides that have happened in the past. We use genocide and the Holocaust in particular as a warning sign that we have to act before they happen, or if terrible things are happening, that are costing the lives of human beings or destroying their ability to live out their lives with any hope and freedom, that good people of conscience cannot stand idly by. And that requires us to capture the lessons of the past, including the genocides of the past, the arguments about the Armenian genocide, those who try to stifle any discussion of that, or you take a look at the at indigenous communities in so many nations across the globe. In the Americas, there was genocidal activity against large segments of the indigenous populations. And America itself is founded on two original sins: the sin of human chattel slavery and the sin of the genocidal activity against Native Americans. And seeing that, being willing to accept our responsibility for what happened and to do everything possible to make amends both to the descendants of those peoples, but also to other similarly situated communities across the globe is absolutely imperative. The second very brief contextual point I would make is under the Trump administration, there were intense debates about which was more important, religious freedom or other human rights. And in the end, they really are one and the same, and that is a false debate. You cannot have freedom of the pulpit without freedom of speech. You cannot have freedom to proselytize without freedom of speech. You cannot have freedom to worship without freedom of association and freedom of speech. You cannot print Bibles or prayer books or educational materials or bulletins or have websites or religious TV shows or newspapers or social media accounts without freedom of the press, without freedom of speech, without freedom of association. And conversely, you cannot have those other human rights if there is no freedom of religion or freedom of conscience. Human rights of other kinds and religious freedom are all interwoven and reinforcing. We will never secure religious freedom until we have ensured that the broader legal and human rights principle that no citizen's rights in any country should ever depend on their religious identity, beliefs, or peaceful practices is the reality in every country. Freedom House tells us in their annual report since the end of World War II that from the end of World War II until 2006, the midpoint of the ebb and flow of human rights in the world on the global level and of democracy on the global level was an expansionary midpoint. There was more of it, particularly after the fall of the Soviet Union. In 1990, there was another enormous infusion of the growth of democracies. But since 2006 until 2021, the midpoint in the ebb and flow of democratic and human rights norms has been decidedly in the reverse direction today. And I say that to say that whatever the state of religious freedom, we will not in the end be able to ensure it. We will not in the end be able to prevent genocides unless we are effective in reversing this trend and ensuring that democracy and human rights is not going to be seen as an aberration in the history of humankind in the 20th century, but as the norm of what human life will be in the 21st century going forward. Now, as we look across the globe in terms of religious freedom, you all know the Pew statistics that say that that now 80% of the world's population lives in countries that have severe restrictions, either from government or from non-government actors or from both of their religious freedom. That's a daunting picture. I will offer just a cautionary note to that statistic. If you also look at the Pew reports, you will see that 75% of the countries across the globe do not have serious restrictions of religious freedom. But when you think of those that do, China, India, Russia, Nigeria, Now, Sudan, back on that kind of list. There's some of the most populated, Pakistan, some of the most populated countries on the face of the earth. Again, whether it comes from governmental forces or it comes from societal forces is not the issue, because to the people on the ground, it really doesn't matter that much in terms of the daunting challenges that we face. And we see those threats coming from several key patterns across the globe. One is the rise in the last 25, 30 years of non-state actors willing to use violence, often in the name of their interpretation of religion, to impose their interpretation by force, the force of arms or the force of government restrictions and coercive power, to make people worship the way they think is right and bar people from worshiping in any way that they think is wrong, whether they do that legally or through, as I said, acts of violence against those community. That has increasingly become the norm. Boko Haram, ISIS, Daesh, here Al-Shabaab, here extremist Buddhist forces in
Myanmar and Sri Lanka.
Yes, and extremist Hindu forces in India. This is a real problem. Jewish extremists on the West Bank in Israel, and extremists who acting some in the name of Christianity here in the United States, in the Central African Republic. Here, every group has those who are willing to use force to bar those with whom they differ from practicing peacefully their religion, and to try and enforce their own interpretation on how others live their lives. This is affected, and secondly is all of the rules and kind of regulations that governments that are scared of religious freedom try to impose on forces in their society that they can't control, particularly true of autocratic governments of any kind. They are frightened by people organizing their lives around ideas that the government can't control. And so the government moves to try and control the religious ideas and ideals that those people organize. And they do it sometimes through petty ways, not just through macro aggressions, but through microaggressions. The way they make people register for any kind, not just to register a church to begin with, which is problematic enough, often making them jump through hoops to do it, but to register their religious activities, to register their schools, to register every piece of their work, so that the government has to give their stamp of approval to every piece of that. And we see that still in areas of Vietnam, particularly the rural areas of Vietnam. We see it in a whole range of the former Soviet Union countries in the stands, where that is a serious problem. So there are diverse countries all across the globe where that remains a very serious problem. And then there are countries that just really just have laws here that bar religions, either altogether or laws that bar religions that don't represent where the majority are. The only country in the world today, or the two, depending on how one looks at Syria and how Syria is configured, in which a minority is oppressing the majority of people in the countries, of course, Bahrain, which is ironic because for all other minorities, including Hindus and Jews and Christians, they have more freedom in Bahrain than they do in most of the other Middle Eastern countries outside of Israel. But still the rights of Shia are significantly restricted, although there has been in the last couple of years improvement that should be recognized and encouraged in that regard. And we see in Pakistan, in India, in Afghanistan, and other countries in the region, significant restrictions on those who do not represent the majority, on Sikhs, who face significant repression in those countries. If we remember what the Taliban was like in 2001 and the laws that were passed in 2001 in Afghanistan, requiring Sikhs to actually wear identification, like the Jews had to wear stars, the enforced clothing behavior, the denial of school for women. You know the range of abuses that the Taliban engaged in last time. And there's no indication that Hindus or Christians or Sikhs are going to fare any better this time than they did last time. But it's in the interest of the world to do everything possible to engage with the Taliban to try and make it clear that doing so will leave them far more isolated and out of the loop of any kind of normality in the world if they renew those kinds of restrictions as seems likely that they will unfortunately do. And so to the status of Sikhs and Hindus and Christians in Pakistan that faces restrictions, often sometimes from government and blasphemy laws and the problematic imposition of blasphemy laws. And Afghanistan doesn't have blasphemy laws per se here, but it has other rules that affect the same impact that blasphemy laws in terms of, at least under the old Taliban, how people were required to live. But for Sikhs and Hindus and Christians in Pakistan, that remains a serious challenge. And that's true anyway that there are blasphemy laws. A quarter of the country had blasphemy laws. Here, thankfully, only about 10% of them have the death penalty here, but that one has it. It is significant. What is blasphemy? It's people simply speaking their religious truth as they believe it here, and as God leads them to believe it. And that is to be punished for that under any circumstances, simply should have no place in any civilized country today. And the same is true with apostasy laws and restrictions on conversions. Here, we know stories in a number of the countries in that region of Sikhs and Hindus facing forced conversions. The opposite happens in reports of that in India. And that those kinds of things really require the international community speak out, but the people with more expertise who are going to be talking about India in just a moment here. So there are serious restrictions that we have. Obviously, some countries, North Korea allows no religion whatsoever. Here, China remains the great equal opportunity oppressor of religion. I talked about different kinds of genocide before. Cultural genocide, the kind of genocide faced by the Jews in the Soviet Union before the collapse of the Soviet Union, or the kind of genocide faced by the Tibetan Buddhist communities in China today, may not technically be a violation of the Genocide Treaty, but I don't see how one can see anything other than the intent to eradicate a people when you really try to destroy them just by denying them the ability to live out their lives. You may not destroy them physically, but you are destroying their ability to live in accordance with the most basic identifications that they have chosen in their life. And that's another form of genocide that has to be opposed, whatever its relation to the technical definition of genocide might be. And of course, what's happening with the Uyghur Muslims and the enforced sterilizations and the clear effort to not only wipe out the culture, but to prevent the reproduction of Uyghur women clearly does rise to the level of that of the.
Excuse me for a moment.
I'm bringing it to a close.
Yeah, it's all right. So just now,
yeah.
Dr. Marianne Thompson-Frenk has joined us. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad. I'm bringing it to a close now, what I was going to say. Here, again, I want to commend those who are receiving the awards here for their work. I want to thank the other speakers who are here, many of whom I've learned from. But I want to conclude with a personal story that ties back to the Holocaust. In the summer of 1939, my father traveled through Poland and Palestine. He was actually wounded by an Arab sniper in Palestine, but remained a great proponent of a peace agreement that would see a Palestinian state and the continuation of a secure Jewish state of Israel throughout his life until his death. He was one of the last in the summer of 39, one of the last visitors to travel through Central Europe and see the glory of European Jewry in its full bloom. He visited Danzig, that city, now Gdansk, that has gone back and forth between Germany and Poland over the centuries, just days before the Nazis had taken over in May of 1939. He went with enthusiasm to see the magnificent historic main synagogue of this vibrant Jewish community. And to his utter dismay, it lay shattered in ruins. Only the portal over what had been the beautiful entranceway still remained intact. Out front, on the lawn, there was a sign that had been erected by the Nazis during the campaign for the governorship of the region, which read, Komm, lieber Mai, mach von Juden uns jetzt frei. Come, dear month of May, and free us from the Jews. With a chilling sense of the impending disaster symbolized by this scene, he gazed upward and saw the words, the ancient vision of the Hebrew scriptures, the book of Malachi, still inscribed over that sole remaining part of the synagogue, the doorway. Alo avachad lechalanu, alo elachad beranu. Have we not all one Father? Has not one God created us? Two signs, two visions, one of hatred and tyranny, the other of brotherhood and sisterhood, of unity and peace and pluralism, one of oppression, the other of freedom, one of darkness and despair, the other of light and hope. This is the choice that we face today. And to the religiously oppressed in every land who live in fear of the hundreds and hundreds of millions afraid to speak of their beliefs, who worship in underground churches and mosques and temples, as authorities discover and punish the devotion to an authority higher than the state, who languish in prisons simply because they love God in their own way, who question the existence of God, who feel so desperate that they flee their homes to avoid persecution, as we have seen so often, to avoid simply being killed because of their faith. To all of them, together, you and I need to reaffirm that we will be there for them. We will not allow other Holocausts, other genocides, other aggressions, macro or mini, that destroy their lives to continue. And then again, and only then, can we make never again truly real. Thank you.
Amen. Ambassador Saperstein, thank you so much. Friends, it was Ambassador David Saperstein. He was the ambassador at large for religious freedom around the world. His accomplishments are just many. It will take the whole hour to read. So please look it up about him. Now we go to the awards, a part of this ceremonies. Pluralist Awards is something like this, or a certificate like this, in person in a few days. Let me see. Now the certificate would read, the Center for Pluralism presents the Award of Pluralist 2020, presented to Walter Ruby, Ajit Sahi, Greg Mitchell, and Dr. Maqsood Chaudhary for your outstanding contributions in making the world a better place by standing up for the religious freedom and human rights of fellow humans of any faith or no faith, and with bias towards none. at the 17th annual Holocaust and Genocide event on January 23rd, 2022. Now I'm going to ask Andra Bayless to introduce Walter Ruby in about 2 minutes time. Andra?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. So Walter, I have had the honor of working with you for many years now and know you to be honest and trustworthy. I am so happy that I've had the good fortune of meeting you. Mohammed, may blessings and peace be upon him, would be so proud of you. In other religions, you'd be called a good Christian, a good Muslim, and in Judaism, you would be referred to, and you are a mensch, who is a good man who lives the highest of human values. So, Walter, you are truly a man for all seasons. You have been a veteran activist in Muslim-Jewish relations. From 2008 to 2017, you served as Muslim-Jewish Relations Director at the Foundation of Ethnic Understanding, organizing hundreds of twinning events, bringing together thousands of Jews and Muslims in over 30 countries on 5 continents. You've worked as a reporter and a commentator for more than 40 years, mainly for American Jewish Israeli publications. And your articles and op-eds have appeared in New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Los Angeles Times, US Today, and other media. And Walter, you co-founded the wonderful Washington Muslim Jewish Forum with me, and I so much appreciate that. And you served as the chairman of the board for many years, and you were actually instrumental. I want everybody to know that Walter was instrumental in creating the now famous Spread Hummus, Not Hate, which was the DMV tour that we took around the Maryland, DC, and Virginia to spread the message that Muslims and Jews are cousins and that we're truly bonded together. Currently, Walter serves as president of Jews and Muslims and Allies Acting Together. We call it Jamaat, which is a grassroots community of Muslim, Jewish, and interfaith activists in Washington, D.C. Though Walter is busy day and night with so many activities, somehow, amazingly, he found time to write a book with Muslim American writer Sabiha Rahman. It's called We Refuse to Be Enemies, How Muslims and Jews Can Make Peace, One Friendship at a Time. And so that's one of the things I think that Walter is famous for, is creating friendship among all of the different religions in this area. And never to resist an opportunity to do good in the world, Walter became a supporter and consultant for Project Rosanna. He was committed to this mission of Israeli doctors training Palestinian doctors as one of the greatest peace initiatives in the region. And he traveled to Israel and West Bank to actually see how those who were ill on the West Bank were compassionately taken care of in the hospitals with Israeli doctors training these Palestinian doctors. And in the midst of all of his other leadership organizational responsibilities, he actually is part of the McLean Rotary Club. It is my honor for you to receive the Pluralist Award. And congratulations, Walter. Keep lifting up humanity, one event, one op-ed, and one book at a time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
I appreciate it.
I am
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Andra. I'm so touched by, first of all,
You may want to take a 1 minute, Walter.
Sure. Very quickly. Very touched by Andra's. I love Andra, and we work together so wonderfully. I'm honored to speak after Rabbi David Saperstein, one of my heroes, although slightly intimidated because I never could reach that level of eloquence. But anyway, I'm here. I'm so, Mike, I think what you do is so beautiful, and this event is so beautiful, keeping alive the lessons of Holocaust and never again. It's very close to me personally because my own mother was a Holocaust survivor, and she came to America, got out by the skin of her teeth, and she got involved in the civil rights movement back in the 60s and so I learned from her, from my mother, that never again is for all human beings and not just for Jews. And that was a very important lesson. And Mike carries that out so brilliantly. And I've worked, and Andrew talked about my work in Muslim-Jewish relations. So I got involved in this work because I wanted to prevent the schism, the Israel-Palestine situation, which I care about deeply, and all of us care about deeply, but I didn't want that to, drive us apart here in America. And I felt we had to work. Muslims and Jews had great work to do to prevent that from happening and to build an alliance. And so I feel so privileged to have been part of that and continue to be part of that after more than 15 years. I see Dr. Maqsood Chaudhary is with us, who's getting an award. Has also been so involved in this work, and also with Project Rosanna that Andrew talked about. So I thank you so much, everybody, from the bottom of my heart, and I've got some tears in my eyes. Thank you.
Congratulations. Now let me introduce Walter. We will have the profit for you later on during the week when COVID subsides. Now let me introduce Ajit Sahi. Ajit Sahi is a veteran Indian American civil rights activist and a journalist with over 35 years of experience in the fields of human rights, civil and political liberties, religious freedom, and investigative journalism. He serves as the advocacy director of the Indian American Muslim Council and is based in Washington, D.C. He regularly briefs the members of U.S. Congress and officials of the United States government, including the State Department. Sahi has also testified before the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. He also leads and coordinates a large coalition of civil rights, faith-based and non-faith organizations. He is at the forefront. He is at the forefront of building an overarching narrative about the persecution of minorities in India, connecting premier global organizations such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Genocide Watch, USERF, and other organizations. We congratulate Ajit Sahi. Ajit, you will have a certificate or a plaque like this in a few days, but congratulations. Thank you very much. Ajit, you want to say 1 minute, 30 seconds words?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm truly honored to be given this award. I don't think when I'm looking at all the recipients today, Mr. Walter Ruby, Dr. Chaudhary, I am truly unqualified to be in this great list. So I am deeply honored. I'm much junior to everybody here who is getting the award, the kind of work they have done. And of course, it's an honor to meet face to face with Ambassador Saperstein. I've heard him speak publicly. I have joined the IRF roundtable whenever he has spoken in the past. He's just outstanding. I also want to add to what you said about me, Mike, is that I am a Hindu and I am not a Muslim. And I work with a Muslim organization. Most unfortunately, India is unfortunately not such a great focus of the current US foreign policy insofar as the violations of human rights, religious freedom are concerned in India. But the truth is that India is today, and a lot of people are saying this already, one of the worst flashpoints on the planet. It is the world's largest democracy. It has the world's second largest population of 1.4 billion people after China. And India is set to implode. Ambassador Saperstein spoke about Freedom House report. Freedom House last year in 2021 downgraded India from India's democracy.
Ajit, we got just a few minutes.
From
Ajit,
being free. Yes. I hope
Ajit,
that
you want to conclude?
Because
we are very tight on time.
Yes, I will just conclude by saying that a lot of people ask me, why do you work for a Muslim cause being a Hindu? And I tell them, I do not work for a Muslim cause. I work for the cause of humanity. We can all be better Jews, better Muslims, better Christians, better non-faith people, better atheists, if we fight for the rights of the other people. Whether we have to call out the atrocities against minorities in Pakistan or in India or in the United States or in West Bank and Gaza, we have to come out, and we have to come out very strongly in support of the persecuted and against the persecution. Thank you for this award again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Congratulations. Andra, again, Dr. Maqsood Chaudhary, please, would you introduce? Make it short, Andra, because we have got 1 hour, we got 3 more speakers. Andra, please.
Okay, I apologize. Short. There's so much I have to say about Dr. Chaudhary. Let me try to do it really fast.
We will do
So
an
Dr.
interview of all these recipients and put it on the website.
Okay, good. So Dr. Chaudhary and I met many years ago when I brought in a very poor elderly man who had an infection that no other doctors would see, but Dr. Chaudhary immediately took him in without payment or insurance. And right then and there, Dr. Chaudhary became my dentist. So Dr. Chaudhary works with Interfaith Bridge Building, and when he found out I knew about it, he wanted to know about every event that I was interested in, and he became a shining star in advocacy to bring the Muslim and Jewish communities together. And he was leading the way in twinning with the Temple Road of Shalom, holding many evenings of dialogue and dinner in his home. And he worked with Rabbi Jeff Sachs of Temple Road of Shalom, twinning with them to give his entire staff, both the dentists and all of the other staff members, in his office in Grove Dental Center in Falls Church, to host the first Syrian refugee health fair, and it was under the auspices of the Greater Washington Muslim Jewish Forum. And once again, when he saw the need now for the Afghanistan refugees, we're now working with Jamat to host the Afghan Refugee Health Fair in one of his offices in the spring. Dr. Chaudhary is past president of McLean Islamic Center, and he's currently one of the executive directors of Jamat, Jews and Muslims and Allies Acting Together, which is a grassroots organization of people who really want to act on all of these issues that are concerning us. The Jewish Islamic Dialogue Society, JIDS, has also benefited from Dr. Chaudhary's generosity, and they have held many different dialogues and dinners in Dr. Chaudhary's home. Dr. Chaudhary has been an initiator of many meetings and actions to bring Hindus and Muslims together in India, and concerns about Pakistan also. His compassion and wish to bring peace in the Middle East led him to travel with Walter Ruby all the way to Israel and West Bank to see for himself the good work of Project Rosanna, to see the Israeli doctors training the Palestinian doctors. He's also now a very respected person and a leader in the McLean Rotary Club. It is an honor to see Dr. Chaudhary receive the Pluralist Award for all the many ways he has lived. He has lived his life with the concept of Islah in his life, which is an Arabic word that means the healing of the world. So congratulations to you, Dr. Chaudhary, for being a great humanitarian and an exemplary interfaith leader and living your faith through service. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you very much. Dr. Chaudhary, you got a minute. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Chaudhary.
He has to unmute.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much to Walter and to you, Mike. And it's kind of a pleasure and honor, and I feel very happy to join this meeting. But the stories which I have been learning from the different speaker make me more kind of concerned what's going on today. And in my opinion, I regardless of getting an award or not, I really want to do something for the cause, which will help us to stop the next genocide. And as Sahi has mentioned very eloquently, that right now we have to prioritize where the most atrocities are happening and what different actors are getting involved. And anything could be done out of this conference and future conferences will be very helpful. And I don't want to take any time, and thank you so much for all the participants, and have a good day. Thanks.
Congratulations, Dr. Chaudhary.
Thank you so much. That's very, very nice of you. Thank you, Mike.
Friends, before I introduce Greg Mitchell, I just want to share Dr. Gregory Stanton will speak powerfully about what can be done about an impending genocide in India. And then Gurvinder Singh will speak about the persecution of minorities. And then again, Mary Ann Thompson will conclude the program. Now let me introduce Greg Mitchell, my friend. Greg Mitchell. Greg, I believe Greg, are you here? If you're here, you're welcome. Greg Mitchell serves as the managing co-chair of the International Religious Freedom Roundtable in Washington, D.C. Chris Sipo of the Institute of Global Engagement co-founded the roundtable and continues to serve. More recently, his work was instrumental in getting several pieces of legislation passed into the law, including Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, which is a public law 114328, then Frank Wolf International Religious Freedom Act, and Greg has got many things to his credit. Most importantly, he runs the International Religious Freedom Roundtable, and where about 180 people come in every week on Tuesday to share what's going on in their nation, their ethnicity, their community, and their faith. And it is one place to learn the entire universe. Greg, I am inspired by your work of standing up for every human being out there, and I admire and appreciate you. And when you come back from Florida, taking care of your children, we will have a plaque or a certificate for you. Greg, if you are here, you got a minute. If not, we'll go to our next speaker. Greg, you got one more second. Now we go to Gregory Stanton. He's a former research professor in genocide studies and prevention at George Mason University in Fairfax County, Virginia. He is best known for his work in the area of genocide studies. He is the founder and president of Genocide Watch, the founder and director of the Cambodian Genocide Project, and the chair of the Alliance Against Genocide. He also served as the president of the International Association of Genocide Scholars. There is a whole lot I can talk about Gregory Stanton. He was on our program 2 years ago, the same program, Holocaust and Genocide 2 years ago, and predicted what's going to happen around the world. And his predictions come fairly close to happening. I hope it does not happen in case of India. Dr. Stanton, by the way, you can go to genocidewatch.com to see about him. Dr. Stanton?
Thank you very much, Mike. It's a real honor to be with this group. I want to emphasize several things right from the start. First of all, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what genocide is. A lot of people think that genocide is an event, that it happens, and that unless the genocide is aimed at destroying a whole group, it's not genocide. Well, that is a violation of the very terms of the Genocide Convention, which defines genocide as the intentional destruction in whole or in part of a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group as such. We are surrounded today by genocide deniers. In fact, the State Department legal office is mainly run by genocide deniers. I had to face them down when I was in the State Department. Joan Donahue, who was at the time the person who was looking after Rwanda and many of the other African countries, denied that what was happening in Rwanda after April 6th, 1994 was genocide. She refused to let the State Department call it genocide because, as she put it, she was not convinced there was adequate evidence of intent. Now, how many people have to die before you have adequate evidence of intent? The truth is, there was plenty of evidence of intent. There were 10,000 people a day being killed in Rwanda. But Joan Donahue blocked the State Department from, and other people in the legal office, from declaring that it was genocide for 3 months until it was too late. The result, 800,000 people died. In fact, we voted to pull most of the UNAMIR troops out of Rwanda. That's called genocide denial. We still have it today. We have a lot of people who think that what happened to the Rohingya was not genocide. Again, the same mistake. It's because they say, oh, well, the evidence isn't that the Myanmar government was trying to kill everybody. Well, again, they were trying to kill enough people, a part of the Rohingya population, and drive out the rest. In other words, forced deportation and genocide go together. Let me take off one other point about this term, genocide. The term genocide has been replaced by the term ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing is the invention of Slobodan Milosevic and Serb propagandists. In fact, it's a direct translation of a Serbo-Croatian word that says ethnic cleansing. They invented this in order to deny genocide, that what they were doing in Bosnia was in fact genocide. And what is amazing to me is that this term, ethnic cleansing, has now become the term that most journalists use when they want to avoid using the word genocide. It's also the term that a lot of lawyers use when they want to avoid using the word genocide. The truth is, the word ethnic cleansing has no legal meaning. It is not even against any treaty or any convention. Forced deportation is. It's against the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. So if you want to talk about the attempt to drive people out of their country and out of their homes, you should talk about forced deportation. But the problem is, forced deportation is usually accompanied by genocidal massacres. And genocidal massacres, my friends, is genocide. They are genocide. Don't ever make the mistake that so many lawyers make, that they think there's not enough evidence of intent.
Excuse me, Greg.
Yes.
I just like to interrupt you for a second. So we have Gurvinder Singh among us. She has just joined.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me get to the main point here. I think we have utterly failed to prevent genocide. And when I say we, I don't mean just the United States. I mean, Europe, all the rest of the world, and in particular, the United Nations. And I will talk a little bit about that at the end of this brief talk. The country I'm particularly worried about right now is India, because we have learned at Genocide Watch that Genocide Watch is not an event. It is a process. It builds up through genocidal processes. And if you're going to prevent genocide, which is the only thing that really makes any sense, I mean, if you declare genocide after it's over, it's too late. Sure, you can establish a court, as I did, along with a lot of other people, to establish the court for the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. I wrote the UN resolutions that created that court. I also wrote the General Assembly and other resolutions to create the Cambodian Tribunal. But the truth is, they were too late. So how can we prevent genocide? That is the real aim. And if we're going to prevent it, we have to understand it. Genocide can't be prevented by doing statistical risk analyses. It can be only prevented by looking at events that lead to genocide because they're part of processes. So let's look at the processes going on in India right now. You may have heard that December 17th to 19th in Hardwar, there was a conference organized by Yati Narsingagan, who was in which the conference literally had speakers calling for arming Hindus to murder Muslims. Now that's called incitement to commit genocide. It's a crime. Under the Genocide Convention, incitement to commit genocide is a crime. And now they have fortunately arrested Mr. Yati. They've arrested him, but only after there was a great uproar because of the obvious intent that implied. But let's look at some of the earlier events that presaged and predicted this hate speech, this incitement. First of all, in India, as we know, there is classification. That's the first stage, as we call it. It's not a linear model. A lot of these things happen simultaneously, but there's a logic to it. You have Hindus, you have Muslims, you have Christians, you have Sikhs, and so forth. Secondly, you have symbolization, in which the Muslims have Muslim names. They have a language in Kashmir that is their own. They go to mosques, not to gurdwaras or to temples, and so forth. And they often have separate dress. Then you have discrimination, in which the Muslims are being discriminated against. The most obvious case of that right now is the Citizenship Amendment Act, which was passed to give special preference for immigration to refugees from Afghanistan and Bangladesh and other countries who were everything but Muslims. Muslims were specifically excluded from the people who would get this preference. That's called discrimination. And you also have dehumanization. Muslims are called terrorists or separatists or criminals or insurgents or termites, as the Home Minister called them. You have organization, in which 600,000 heavily armed Indian Army troops and police dominate Kashmir today. You have polarization, in which Prime Minister Modi and his BJP incite anti-Muslim hatred. They use social media to spread falsehoods about Muslims. They attempt, in other words, to polarize, divide the country. That kind of polarization is vital to genocide. Seventh, we have preparation, in which the Indian Army occupies Kashmir, in which BJP leaders speak of the final solution for Kashmir, and now are actually calling for arming Hindus to murder Muslims. We have persecution, in which Kashmiri Muslims are locked down. They're subject to arrest, torture, rape, and murder. So anybody who says to you, oh, it can't possibly happen in India, doesn't know what they're talking about. They don't know the history of India. And they also don't even know the history of the United States. People sometimes say, well, it can't happen in India because India is a democracy. Well, so is the United States. And yet we committed genocide against our own Native American population. We also committed genocide during the slave trade against African Americans. So this is a country that is a democracy, and yet we also have committed genocide. And so it is possible in India. And the reason why I say it in particular right now is the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, was chief minister in Gujarat in 2002 when mobs massacred over 1,000 Muslims in Gujarat. And Mr. Modi just stepped back and said nothing. In fact, the evidence is he ordered his police not to intervene. That is what will happen in India. The organized mobs will carry out the genocide, and these will be organized by RSS and BJP, goons. I mean, basically people who are in favor of genocide. It'll be like sort of turning the SS loose on the society. And it won't be the Indian state, in other words, who carries it out if there is a genocide. What we need to do is make it very clear to Mr. Modi, if there is a genocide in India, we will hold him accountable because he is the best chance to stop it. And what we have to do is also get Indian civil society activated so that it can be stopped from within. That is the best way to stop a genocide, to stop it from within. And so I'm calling for Indian civil society and civil society around the world, and also our governments, to tell Mr. Modi in no uncertain terms, we won't put up with another genocide in the world, and we're not going to especially have one in your wonderful country. And by the way, I do love India. I spent a whole year living there in the Indian Law Institute. And I think that India is a great country with huge potential. They can't, however, have another genocide as they did at partition. We have already seen some genocidal massacres. There were at least 25 massacres in Kashmir in the last 20 years. There are also massacres that go in the other direction, of Hindus actually killing Muslims and then Muslims killing Hindus. So it is this kind of binary or bipolar kind of genocide that I'm most worried about in India. Finally, we have the stage of denial. And that is the stage, I'm afraid, where we are today. The Modi government is going to deny. They're going to say it's all an exaggeration. You can't possibly have this happen. Well, that's what they told me in Rwanda in 1989 when I was living there. They said, oh, you can't possibly have a genocide here. After all, people are all getting along very well here in Rwanda. But I could see all of these early warning signs then, including the ethnic identification on the ID cards, in which they said Tutsi, Hutu, Twa were naturalized. And I was shocked by that. And I went to I had dinner one night with Joseph Kavarugana, the president of the Supreme Court of India. And I said, can't you strike this down as unconstitutional? And he said, no, we don't have judicial review. You're going to have to meet with the president. So I got a meeting with President Habyarimana. We talked about the project that I was there for, which was to help them get the judicial system to work much better than the Belgian system that they were trying to make work, and it didn't work. But then we started talking about the ID cards, and I said, you know, these ID cards could be used for genocidal massacres. At that point, it was like a mask went down. He did not want to hear this. And I said, Mr. President, if you don't do serious prevention here in Rwanda, I predict that you will have a genocide here within 5 years. This was 1989. And it's in the official records that his note taker took. And of course, I mean, it was coincident, I'm sure. I don't have the gift of prophecy, but 1994 was when that genocide began 5 years later. So I'm not saying that genocide is inevitable in India at all. I don't think genocide is happening right now. But what I do think is we have serious danger. Now, what can be done? I don't think the UN is going to be able to do anything, because the UN itself is, I think, fatally flawed. The Perm 5 veto has paralyzed the Security Council. The United for Peace resolution has seemingly been forgotten, so the General Assembly won't take action. And after all, the UN is an organization of nation states, not of peoples, as its charter begins. It is an organization where national interest is the real determinant of most national policies. And nations don't want to interfere with what happens inside other nations. And minorities are considered the realm of domestic jurisdiction in most nations. So the UN Charter doesn't protect minorities. Also, I believe the International Court of Justice has gutted the Genocide Convention in its Bosnia and Croatia decisions, which were wrongly decided, based on its refusal to see enough intent by Serbia in
What's the hope?
Genocide. I think the hope is going to be from inside India. It's going to be the mobilization of civil society in India to stop the genocidal progress, the genocidal process. Also, I think we can have some effect because our leaders can speak to the leaders. It's what diplomats are supposed to do. And so I would urge our leaders to make it very clear to Mr. Modi that this current process needs to be stopped. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gregory Stanton. Appreciate it. Now we go to our speaker, Gurvinder Singh. He spoke about our genocide event of Native Americans that was sponsored by Marianne Thompson-Frenk about 10 years ago. Gurvinder Singh is the finance director and international humanitarian director for United Sikhs. In his long association with the United States, he has responded to and been deployed to multiple disasters worldwide. including tsunamis, hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, typhoons, and earthquakes. He has led many humanitarian aid projects, including the massive global COVID-19. And he speaks with passion about what's happening with minorities, the persecution of minorities in India in general. Gurvinder, you got about 7 minutes. Please go ahead. And after that, we have Marianne Thompson-Frenk, the last speaker. Gurvinder, please. Is Gurvinder there?
He needs to
He's
unmute.
muted. Unmute.
Yes, I apologize. That would help if I unmute it. It would be a little easier to hear me. Thank you, Mike, for allowing me the privilege of addressing this robust gathering. Dr. Stanton, that was an amazing presentation in terms of the legalities and the uses of language and how powerful that is. Because many times you do see individuals use language that doesn't have any legal ramifications or legal bindings, such as ethnic cleansing. So it's very important that we are very careful with the language that is used. In fact, we know that all too well because for decades, 1984 was referred to as a riot. Even the Sikh community itself, because it was so pervasive in the media, the Sikhs amongst themselves would discuss 1984 as a riot, as opposed to what it really was, a genocide. So we know all too well the importance and the substance of language. What I want to focus on, especially with the recent passing of Desmond Tutu, the Archbishop, is a quote that he stated with eloquency and also with urgency, is that if you are neutral in situations of injustice, then basically you have chosen the side of the oppressor. And as Dr. Stanton has stated, that it is up to civil society to deal with these situations within the nation, as opposed to without the nation, as opposed to looking elsewhere. Individuals based, living, brought up in India, owe it to their countrymen, owe it to their allegiance to their nation to speak up. They didn't do it in 1984 when Sikhs were targeted. They didn't do it in 1992 when the Babri Masjid was demolished under false pretenses and the massacre of thousands and thousands of Muslims that occurred. They didn't do it in 1999 when Graham Staines and his 2 young children were burned alive in Odisha, and multiple churches were burnt and ransacked in the 2000s. So the question is, will they do it? Do they have the capacity to do it? And do they have the gall to do it? Because we have undergone the repercussions, the wounds, and just the pain of knowing that not only have your people been raped, massacred, tortured, children have been put on grills and roasted alive, tires have been put around individuals' necks and they've been put on fire. And when they're trying to put out the fire and they're trying to squirm and save themselves, mobs would laugh and say that, look, they're doing Bhangra, which is a dance. We've undergone that. Not only have we undergone that, we've undergone the continuous injustice that was perpetrated by electing those individuals who led, orchestrated, assisted in, targeted, took part in these killings. They were given accolades. They were given positions of power. Not just 1 or 2, multiple. In fact, the one who was responsible for the genocide in 2002 in Gujarat is a prime minister at this very minute. So that goes to show what is the philosophy of the nation itself. When you start electing individuals to power who not only took part, but led, they have blood on their hands. They have killed innocent people. They have killed women and children. They have brutalized entire communities. And they are the ones now who will decide the future of a nation because we have given it to them in this electoral process. So it is urgent. It is necessary for civil society to understand that if they do not take these decisions within their own hands, that if they do not speak up, if they do not notify, if they do not agitate, if they do not challenge these individuals, then I would go to say that the death of the innocents will also be on their hands. They have to be held responsible. When you elect individuals to power who then go on and commit a genocide, then you have sided with them. You have given them that power. You have given them the state resources. Just this past few weeks in Hardwar, the convention occurs. These blood-curdling claims to exterminate a people. When that is highlighted from abroad, mostly, people on Twitter, because I monitor Twitter, you had government officials, you had IS officers, you had individuals in the bureaucracy saying that it was no big deal. They're just talking amongst themselves. This is just a small crowd. Even when that individual was arrested, I don't know if anybody has seen the video, he is challenging the police officers there. And the police officers are not seen as a powerful authority. Rather, they're seen as a subservient force. The police is folding, they're folding their hands. And literally, it seems as if the police isn't directing that individual. Rather, it's the individual that's directing the police. And he says, "Tum pachtaoge," that basically you will regret this. Isn't that amazing? You go on in a city that I was actually raised in Hardwar in 1984. We experienced the horrors of our neighbors' houses getting burnt, of our businesses getting targeted with an X. Because at that, you don't know who the owner of a business is. The name of the business is written in the localized language. So how did these individuals know that a Sikh owned this business? Because those businesses were marked with an X to show the looters, the marauders who were let out of jail to commit these atrocities. So we have seen it firsthand in Hardwar, and it comes full circle again with calls for the extermination and the genocide of people. And instead of challenging, instead of saying not in our name, instead of saying never again, excuses have been given. So I would like to challenge anybody listening and people of good conscience. If you want to look your children in the eye, then no more excuses. The time isn't tomorrow. The time isn't next week. The time isn't, as Dr. Stanton has stated, after a genocide has occurred or during a genocide. The time is now to prevent a genocide. Because minorities, people who may have a different ethnicity, we're tired of being the sacrificial lamb over and over again. Tired of seeing our sisters raped, tired of seeing our children massacred and killed before us, tired of seeing our brothers imprisoned falsely or killed extrajudicially or hunted down simply because of the way they look, the way they talk, the way they dress, the way they eat, the way they worship. So the nation must awaken, the nation must challenge, the nation must move forward powerfully unequivocally and unapologetically. So we request, in fact, not request, we demand that anybody of good conscience who considers himself or herself a human being, who considers himself or herself a Hindu, a Muslim, a Sikh, a Christian, an agnostic, an atheist, doesn't matter what your belief is. But if you think that you want your children to have a robust and peaceful future, which any faith or no faith preaches, then it is upon us to ensure that happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Gurvinder. Appreciate that. Friends, we go to the last segment of the program. I hope all of this has been meaningful to you. Now I introduce Mary Ann Thompson-Frenk. She is the president and co-founder of Memnozine Foundation, Memnozine Institute. She's a sculptor, writer, public speaker, and a humanitarian. I have known Mary Ann for nearly 20 years now, and I'm amazed at her energy to bring people together, to bring people who are oppressed. She has brought many Native Americans together, which was considered a difficult and impossible task. She organized a big event in Dallas in 2004 or 5, somewhere near there, bringing 40 plus faith tradition, including some 25 Native American traditions from Alaska all the way to Amazon. And I was a witness to a grand opening of a medicine garden on a few acres of land in the Yucatan Peninsula for the Mayans who did not have medical facility or hospital. Mary Ann bought a land, put the garden so the shamans can harvest medicines from there. Mary Ann is a recipient of the same Pluralist Award about 10 years ago in Dallas, and she is going to talk at the end. Mary Ann, please. Mary Ann, you have to unmute.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good. I was just saying, it's an honor to be here with everybody. And as always, I learned so much from listening to people. So I always cannot wait to hear what everyone has to say, because it helps me in my work around the world. Yes, with the Memnozine Institute, we now have chapters in Japan and Israel, Palestine, and Mexico. We have 2 campuses in Mexico. We were able to negotiate the first treaty in 300 years between the Hopi and Navajo nations and get the most people to testify for the Liberian Truth Commission. So there's a lot of work that we've done around the world. And when people ask what we do, we always say it's just to empower people to handle the challenges of globalization in a responsible way. And that includes multiple things. But when people talk about globalization, they talk about it in financial terms. And now people are talking about it in sometimes beyond economics to talk about the environment. But what people always leave out is the fact that globalization is made of people of different paths, people of different cultures, people of different religions. And unfortunately, we Homo sapiens sapiens have a long history of really trying to label our problems on the other, because it's easier. It's easier to say when there's an issue, it's their fault, whoever they are, because then you don't have to take personal responsibility for a community. A good friend of mine named Ruma Bose, she's the Bose family, if anyone enjoys speaker sound systems. She is the author of Mother Teresa's CEO. And she told me a story that came out of doing her thing for her MBA. And she ended up going next door. Literally, her family had this huge place in India. She went next door to where Mother Teresa was. And it was literally a hop, skip, and jump over there. But she said her family didn't want to see the poor. So most of her family would go a different route, and it would take them 45 minutes to drive so they didn't have to see the poor that Mother Teresa served. Ruma was considered the black sheep of the family because she walked out the other side of the house so she could go work with them. And when I hear all this stuff about India, one of the things that I worry about, and I haven't heard people talk about, is that we do have a system of layers. And I see that a lot in my work in Mexico too, where if you have more Native American blood, you're considered less than, more Caucasian blood from Europe, you're considered more than, better. And people don't want to talk about these systems, whether they actually have names or not. But when you don't talk about them, you have what we have like here in the United States. And I was listening to, and people were talking in the last couple of speeches about how casual it is when we don't address genocides, what it means. Here in the United States, we have streets named after Mirabeau Lamar, who personally participated in literally killing people. We have text in which he bragged about it, letters and journals, and talked about babies and all sorts that he murdered. And we have the very streets in which his hands ran with blood named after him today. These are things that have become casualized. And when you get to where it's casualized, then you inspire people like Adolf Hitler, who then went, and a lot of people don't know this, we actually have documents where Hitler said, I took my inspiration to get rid of the Jews by studying how effectively the United States got rid of its Native American problem. So when you start looking at that and you understand what was effective about it, one of my degrees is in organizational psychology, and you look and you say, it's not just an individual, it's not just an entity, it's both. How are they interacting? Today we talk about mimetics, but how did that mimetic work? And it always goes back to, back then they talked about an infestation of Native Americans that had to be eradicated. Hitler talked about the rats. I heard someone else here, talk about termites in India. We hear this again and again and again. And if you can dehumanize, you can move forward. But the other thing I'm not hearing people talk about is the economic precedent, the economic benefit to genocide. Because I have yet to study a single genocide where there weren't people benefiting economically. And we're talking about how at the United Nations is not as effective because it's nation states, but nation states are interested in economics. So we don't want to look at the whole picture. We're not going to be able to really change history from repeating itself. And unfortunately, if we go back and we look at history, we like to look at it in silos. There are an awful lot of people here in the United States that were invested financially and benefiting from the genocide that eventually happened in the Holocaust in Germany. And similarly, there were a whole lot of people that have been invested in enabling other genocides to occur around the world. When I went to Rwanda, and Mike Ghouse asked me to talk about that, but I went to Rwanda and I was walking on the bones of children and literally had an experience of hiding under a desk when one of the perpetrators came back to enjoy his work, walking out with a machete with a big skull on his head, baby skull on his head that he had personally killed. And, he's proud. I mean, talk about terror. Here's a mass murderer carrying a machete that he probably killed some of the people with, visiting the way, if anyone has studied serial killers, it's the same kind of thing, walking around and getting high on where he had participated in the killing. Today we have AFRICOM, which the United States and Russia and the UK have all come together, and they created an army so that people can go in and get some of the minerals that are financially beneficial. And what did they do? They hired a lot of the perpetrators, and the ones they hired didn't have to go and face court. So, we have to take a look at the fact that there is a financial benefit, and we need to address that if we truly want to get rid of genocide. And one of the things we need to do is really go back and look at the root of it. What caused what? And how do we do that? And so that's why today I've invited a friend of mine who I find to be extremely prolific and I'm blessed to work with. Her name is Isabel Rossignol. She is someone that has worked with Martin Luther King. She was put in charge of organizing the students in Louisiana to fight against segregation. So incredible woman, but she is also the daughter of two genocide Holocaust survivors. And I want to do something different today than you just hearing me. I want you to hear as I ask her some questions. Many I've asked her in private before, but I think it would be a benefit to you all because she learned that from her parents. She worked with, doing some of the darkest times here in the South part of the United States. And most recently, she went down to McAllen with me to see the children in cages here in the United States. And she's disturbed like I am by the commonalities of history. So Isabel, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, good.
Hi,
Thank you
Isabel.
so much
Good
for
to see you.
agreeing to be part of this
Hi,
today.
Mike. How are you? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Isabel, before we go further, can you tell me a little bit about your parents' story?
Yes, both my father was from Krakow and my mother was from Poznan. Of course, in 1941, they didn't know each other. They were young. My father was in Auschwitz, but only for a year he escaped. I'm not going to get into all the details. My mother was in Auschwitz for 3 years. She was one of the ones that would take the bodies onto the wagons, and she escaped by throwing herself on the wagon and putting a body over her. You know, when I listen to all these, you know, everything about genocides, the pain, it's all similar. You know, how it all starts, just everything that everyone is saying, you know, the illegality. If you look at what's happening at the border and you compare everything and the economics of what was going on in Germany and what is happening in this country and in Mexico, you know, they're all the same. But anyway, my parents, you know, I went to Auschwitz and Buchenwald, and in Auschwitz in a bush, I left a picture of my mother. Anyway, I just told them that we won because she survived. And there's a whole large family here, beautiful family, because she did survive. But my whole life has been dedicated to helping other people that are going through the same thing. We're going back to the border, as we were talking last night. Mary and I were having dinner about how we're going to help again. So yes, that's my parents survived.
Can you share with everyone, Isabel, if you don't mind, the poignant moment that you told me about your parents when they were sent down to Louisiana and how surreal that was to them during that time?
Yes, well, they first came to New York, Ellis Island, and you know, it's very cute. My father played any string instrument, and he was playing the accordion and brought an accordion with him. And there's a picture of him in the museum there of him playing because they made him play. Anyway, from New York, we went down to first Arkansas, where I was born. And then to Louisiana, but on the train with my grandfather, who did survive, very unusual. He was put in a monastery and was saved by monks during the war. Anyway, it was my grandfather, my father, my brother, older brother, and my mother who were put on a train. My father could speak 5 languages, but none of them were English. So anyway, they're on this train, and they were in a car, and multiple times they were asked to move. So they go to the next seat and the next seat. Well, on the 4th time, the conductor moved them to the second car, which was all white. They didn't realize they were in a black car. And because it didn't matter to them, you know, the prejudice was not there. So anyway, they went ahead and realized, and my grandfather looked to my father and said, where in the hell have we come to? You know, it's the same here. It's someone else, but it doesn't change. So, you know, that was what happened. It's a great story that my father used to tell a lot to us about all.
I think that's so important for people to hear how one thing does inform the next, because, you know, what I'd like to do now is ask you about how you felt when we went down to McAllen and what you saw with this kind of legacy behind you and the civil rights work that you did.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you look at the comparisons of, and I know there are a lot of people that don't want to hear, and there are conflicting answers about being compared to the Holocaust. But what people have to understand is everyone is speaking today about the genocides and the pain that they're going through, that I was listening to. It's all the same, you know, it's so similar, you know, and that's when we went to Mexico, down to the border. I didn't know what to expect. I knew what was going on and what the media was telling us. I had to go. So when you called me and said, will you go? There was no question. I was going to go. And we went. When we were there, I guess after about 30 minutes, a school bus came in. And for some reason, everyone just knew we had to stop that bus. And Marianne was one of the leaders that kneeled and wouldn't let the bus go in, along with others. And we saw children, and there were cages. They were in cages. There were no adults. They were, no one was younger or older than 5. They were all between 3 and 5. And the look on their face was just shock. And they were going into this detention center, which we were told there were no children in this center. All of them put their little bitty hands all around the bus, and they just all did it. And I can't tell you, I will live with that picture in my mind forever. You know, we have pictures, we have proof. We were there, and we have to look at what is going on around the world and here.
Isabel, you based the program at the beginning. One such image was me, a 10-year-old watching, reading my mom's book, where a number of Jews were shot into a pit. That image has been inspiration for me to do what I do. Thanks for sharing that point.
Thank you. Thank you.
We got a few more minutes, friends.
I do want to say one more thing, Mike, if that's okay. It's very short. You know, the Holocaust didn't start with Auschwitz. That's how it ended. That's how it ended. So I just want to leave everyone with that thought.
Thank you, Isabel.
And I think
Marianne, you want to?
Yes, I think
Go
that
ahead,
is such a powerful statement, that what Isabel was saying, that the Holocaust ended with Auschwitz, because when we look at what led to what, we have to say, how did we get there? And we have to pay attention as well here in the United States. We've lost the moral authority. I cannot say that enough. We have lost the moral authority. I love this country. But when you had so many people after January 6th happy about people that said Auschwitz didn't finish the job and things like that, and it casualized the embracing of the lack of values that the Holocaust symbolizes, it makes any genocide in the world seem casual. And we cannot casualize oppression. We cannot casualize the belittling and the dehumanization of any one demographic, because the single most number one thing that threatens us is to dehumanize another people. And while it takes a lot of guts when you're in your social area, whatever the society is that you're in, we all have our rules. People talk about, they don't, there are understandings, but we cannot speak up. Our lack of speaking up is what threatens the world. So I wanted to highlight these different comparisons over history, because they are related, they do inform. And I do see all this as an energy that moves. I mean, you can almost trace, you know, what happened before Native Americans, to Native Americans, to how it inspired Hitler, to how what happened over there in that genocide has inspired others. I mean, I won't take the time to do that now, but you can see how each one casualizes each thing. And here in the United States, we're at risk again, because again, we have a history of genocide against Native Americans, and all those children that are still in cages right now are Native Americans. So we're in danger of repeating history. And the more people casualize and are comfortable about it here in their own, within their own borders, why in the world should they care about India or any other country? So what that means is that we have to be able to articulate for humanity and say that this is the same issue, it is personal. And we have to speak up for people in India, the way we speak up for people on the border, and the way we remember and honor those people who have been hurt through past genocides, is to no longer be silent. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Friends, we'll conclude the program with a peace pledge. And I'm going to say the sentence. You are welcome to speak up, or at least think in your mind. I will speak up when there is injustice. I'll speak up when there is injustice. I'll speak up when the truth is not spoken. I will question myself. What is my loss if someone worships God every which way he or she wants, or not worship? I will do my best to make and my actions mitigate conflicts and nurture goodwill. I will do my best to do my share of nurturing goodwill for the benefit of all. I will do my share of peace work without looking for others to do their share. I will do my best to respect the God-given uniqueness of each individual. Blessed are the peacemakers. And now I pronounce all of you to be the peacemaker. Your role is to mitigate conflicts and nurture goodwill and speak out against injustice to anyone and everywhere. I never say again. Amen. Thank you very much. And this program will be listed at YouTube. Our channel is Center for Pluralism. Go to youtube.com, then type in Center for Pluralism. You will have this video by tomorrow morning. Thank you very much. God bless you all. Thanks for all of you for joining, and thanks for all our speakers for sharing their thoughts. It's open mic now. Anybody can say anything for the next 3 to 4 minutes. We'll close this.
Thank you so much, Mike, for bringing this powerful program to us. It really needs to be shown throughout the world because of all the information and the different perspectives that were shared, from religious to people on the ground to people who have been harmed, and of course the history of the Holocaust. And the biggest question is, what can we do?
Yes. And I think Ambassador Saperstein, Gregory Stanton, our Singh, and every speaker, including Mary Ann Thompson and Isabel, have generally mentioned what can we do. Speak out against injustice. That's the first thing we can do. Open mic, anybody is welcome to say anything.
Thank you, Mike. I have met you a couple of times in the past. Said Patel here. I commend you for bringing out such powerful speakers. We got to do this often. I came to know just this morning, and I was glued to the program for the last 2 hours. It's because the speakers were so powerful and spoke so plainly and which needed to be said. So thank you for your leadership. We appreciate it, and we look forward to your continued participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Said. Appreciate that. Charles, please go ahead.
Yes, please. I think I've been jumped by Said. Anyway.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm particularly grateful to you, Mary Ann, because if I'm right, you were the only person in this whole crowd who mentioned Native Americans. Well, for the last 21 years, I've been a co-worker with Jay Winter Nightwolf on his Native American advocacy show, and I would like to circulate the URLs and addresses for his work, which he's going to have a show that starts, I think, in 2 hours, in fact. So he's still active, and I would like to make a connection between you and indeed everybody here and Nightwolf and some of his activity. He is the leading spokesperson that I know of in this region, and his voice has been unheard by the general public and by activists for entirely too long, and we have to turn that around. So,
and thanks, Charles, for I was on his show through you.
Mike.
Thanks, Charles. I was on his show through you. Syed Hassan, please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Mike, for putting together this wonderful program. It was very inspirational. And I remember when you came to Kansas City a long time ago and gave a talk about Crescent Peace Society. Yes,
it was 100 years ago.
I think last, but thank you so much. Great work. And I wish you all success with the CFP. You're doing great work. And the speakers were wonderful. We learned a lot from them.
Thank you. Thank you. Open mic, anybody for the next 5 to 6 minutes?
Yes, thank you, Mike. One of the things that I just wanted to add for everything is people keep saying, what can I do? And I know saying speak up seems like such a tiny, boring answer, but I really urge everybody to review, we posted in the past, the 10 symptoms of a society leading to genocide. And I truly do mean what's happened here in the United States. We went right up to that border, and Gregory, Stanton and I talked about this last year. We really were at that precipice. And the thing that when you diagnose it, and I ran this by 4 other scholars to make sure that I wasn't just blowing smoke out of my ears, but every single one of them said the analysis was correct. When you take a look at that, the thing that kept us from going over where people spoke up. And that means in private homes, that means one-on-one conversations, that means when you have a platform. The more you speak up and say, I refuse to dehumanize a group of people, it changes everything. And I'll just share this one brief thing because it's kind of funny, but it illustrates that human point. You know, my mom's in her 80s. She's just socialized. She went to a luncheon one day with about 12 women. And one of them spoke up and said, I hate all gay people. You know, I wish they'd all be dead. I can't stand. And they started going around and they finally got to my mom and everyone agreed. And she just was the one that spoke up and said, I don't have any issue with them. My gay neighbors have the prettiest yard. Anytime I want my hair done, I end up going to someone who's, and she made it, you know, said it was, I don't have an issue. And suddenly all 11 other women said, you know what, you know, the first woman who had spoken up said, I only said that because I thought this would be popular to say in this crowd, because I watched Fox News and that's what was said. And all the other 10 women said, we only did that because we were expected, but we agree with your mom, with Deborah. And so they found out none of them hated them. That is how simple, when you hear in Rwanda and they said, kill the cockroaches, and now you hear in India, the termites, it is so easy to casualize this, but the power of one person speaking up can change that. And you multiply that by the population, and it can help stop the genocide from occurring. So don't underestimate your voice. That's all I wanted to say.
Well said, Marianne. Well said.
Thank you very much.
If I could just follow up very quickly, this is Walter. I just want to say how incredibly moving this was, how incredibly powerful, and the speakers were so superb. And what I took from it, it was powerful. For example, to hear Greg Stanton say, he doesn't dislike India. He's lived there. He loves it. And yet he's willing to say the bitter truth of the danger of the terrible things that are happening to Muslims there. I myself, in my own life, I love Israel. I spent many years of my life there, but I've felt all along the need. I can't be silent when my Palestinian brothers and sisters are persecuted or dehumanized. And the last point I would make, Marianne and Isabella's testimony was so powerful that it's happening on our own. It's happening in India. It's happening in Palestine. It's happening to my friends, the Crimean Tatars by the Russians. I mean, there's so many cases, but it's also right here at home, and it's right there on the border. And we can love America and stand up against that, and we have to. And so thank you all so much.
Walter briefly mentioned about your book, We Refuse to Be Enemies.
Okay, I'll mention it. I'll hold it up here. Yes, it's the We Refuse to Be Enemies by myself and Sabia Rehman. So a Jew and a Muslim writing a book together, American Jew and American Muslim, how we came together, and our advocacy for Muslim-Jewish friendship and togetherness in the cause of saving democracy in America. That as the two largest minority faiths, we have we can do something together to speak up for all minorities, but we're also want to work with all peoples and all from all religions, but all ethnicities, to save this country, to save democracy, to save pluralism. Mike's advocacy for pluralism is so important. It's just a precious concept. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, Mike.
Well, thank you, Walter. Thank you, Walter. Appreciate that.
Mike, Goshe. And he's Muslim?
If you got something on your mind, speak up. We got free microphone. If
I'm
not,
not
we
sure.
can.
This is Kay. I'm not sure if you'll hear me.
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Oh, okay, sometimes it doesn't work and I have to go outdoors. I admit every word of this was precious. There's a lot to think about, and I admit I'm overwhelmed and saddened. Maybe in the future, and this is not a criticism, it's just an addition, that maybe 1/10 of what is said give anecdotal stories of success. And I'm remembering 3 points. I'm remembering during the genocidal days in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and the Rwanda genocide was happening at the same time. And I ended up on a court committee with different religious groups working very hard on that issue for years. And there was a lot going on. People like Steve Walker resigned from the State Department, just a lot of attention to that. At the very same time, we saw the genocide in Rwanda, the bodies, the dead bodies on the front pages of the Washington Post. And the way I got active in one it still bothers me today. The way I was active in one is that I found my way to many Bosnia groups and the Bosnia Support Committee, the multi-religious committee, and there was nothing out there that I ever heard about, and it was largely ignored, the Rwandan genocide. And I still feel personally guilty about that and said so at the Holocaust Museum once. But I want to finish one because I'm feeling awfully powerless now when I know everyone who's on this session has done amazing things. And for some reason, I just flashed to something so tiny that I did once as a reminder to all of us, and I know you all know this, but as a reminder to us of the little things we do. And one time, after seeing a movie at the East Street Cinema, I was walking back to my car and a fellow was selling the homeless published newspaper, formerly homeless people, Street News. And when it was $2, $1, I always added $1 so that the person selling could get an extra $1. Haven't seen it in ages because I haven't been out much. But the guy told me that he'd written a poem in that edition. And I was walking back to my car and I found the poem and it was on Florence Nightingale. And I walked back to him and I asked him to autograph it. I don't know much of how he reacted to it, but we all have moments where we give people dignity, one-to-one. And at least we can remind ourselves that we have those little gestures that cross our paths, maybe every day.
That was such a beautiful narrative you mentioned about how we can make it effective, one person at a time. Thank you so much. We got another 5 minutes. We'll close the program.
Can I say something?
Yeah, please do.
Yes, I'm Humaira Ali, and I was saying that we should have some written steps to be taken as to we all can do a little bit of something, write letters to our representatives and to the senators, respective senators, and to make a form letter. If someone from this group can send it to us, then we can send to our respective representatives to look into this matter of hate against fellow human beings that is being practiced in India. I mean, under this particular leader, so that he can knock back to his senses, or also make a presentation in United Nations, so he can be named and shamed for this behavior of inculcating hate and killing of innocent human beings. Like in 2002 March, thousands of Muslims were killed. Then again in 2021, that is just last year, so many Muslims were killed, innocent Muslims, unarmed Muslims were shot down by the citizens. They were given the guns to shoot down the Muslims. Even the police were shooting down the Muslims. They got caught on the camera. So this is just full of hate, oppression against a fellow human being. I think that was in 1984, when thousands of Sardarji brothers and sisters and children were massacred throughout India and were burnt alive throughout India. And
Gurvinder had very eloquently shared that. I don't know if you heard him, but we will put this video on the website, not only on the website Center for Pluralism, but it will be on our YouTube channel, youtube.com. And then just type in Center for Pluralism. You will have the video within a day.
Mike, can I add something?
Very thing that you are talking about.
Mike, can I add something quickly?
Please do.
I have prepared a letter for sending to all the representatives in Washington. So if you like, I can send the letter to you and you can forward to anybody.
Please
do. That will be nice.
Yes, I just was working on it today in the morning.
Okay.
And I thought I will wait until I hear your presentation here. Yeah.
And I would request all of you to put in your email in the chat mail, and that will come to me, and I will share that letter with everyone out there. Thank you, Syed Hassan Bhai, for drafting the letter.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Walter, you want to say something?
I just need to go and just thank you again from the bottom of my heart, Mike. This was one of the greatest programs I've been
Well,
part of.
congratulations again. You deserved it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much,
I hope
Walter.
we'll all be connecting and stay connected. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Walter.
Thank you.
I will save all the emails and send it. Marianne, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to add one thing. People keep asking what they can do. A few years ago, we had an issue here and on the SMU campus where they had a virtual bulletin board, and some people had gone in and were encouraging people to attack LGBT students, and they put it up there and they put their photographs, what their schedule was, where they lived, where they worked, and they were leaving them just bloody. It was horrible. And what the local community ended up doing is they came up with a symbol, which basically, I think it was, it's been a while, I think it was a rainbow hand. And if you were a business, you put this in your window and it meant your safe space. That if you think you're about to be attacked, if you think someone's following you, you can go into this place of business and know that you can wait it out, you will be safe there. Well, enough people did it that it created the opposite social pressure. And I was thinking of that when one of the speakers was talking about the X that was painted to make them a target. You can use these same tools to fight back. Now, it takes guts because in certain situations, it can make yourself a target when some people say, oh, you've sympathized. However,
Yes.
if you have enough mass people do it, then that pressure can reverse situations. So, someone was asking for, stories of success. There are different ways that communities can start fighting back, and we can find those stories everywhere, but I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you. Well, friends, thank you very much. And this video will be at the YouTube channel, Center for Pluralism. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, all our speakers. And thank you, all our guests here. You all have a nice evening and whatever is left. God bless
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Be the activist you are. Speak up against injustice.
Thank you, Mike.
Speak the truth. Thank you, Robert Chaitel. We'll have you next year.
Okay,
Again.
thank you very
Thank
much. I look forward to it.
Yes. God bless you all. You are the blessed peace.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much, Mike. You really pull us all together and inspire us to really come out and do something. You are one of the bravest people I know, and I mean that sincerely.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. Goodbye.